There is a message making its way to you right now, and it carries real weight. Before you read another word, pause for just a moment. Breathe, because what is coming through did not arrive by chance. Something shifted in this connection, something that has been quiet for a very long time, finally began to stir, and now it is finding its way to the surface at last. Welcome everyone. If this resonates with you, please subscribe, hit that bell icon, and make sure all notifications are turned on, so you never miss a message like this one. Everything shared here is designed to make you look at things from a different angle, sometimes in ways you did not see coming. The person connected to you has been holding on to something for far longer than they would ever say out loud. This did not begin yesterday or last week. This has been quietly building inside them for a long time. Layer by layer, moment by moment, behind a surface that looked perfectly fine. Even when they acted unbothered, even when their behavior suggested nothing had changed, they never actually stopped thinking about you. There was no single morning where they woke up and made a clean decision to stop caring. What truly happened is that they pushed their emotions down, buried them somewhere deep and dark because they did not know how to hold them. And here's the truth about emotions that get buried rather than expressed. They do not fade. They do not dissolve. They remain alive inside the silence. And with each passing day, they grow heavier and harder to ignore. What is coming through from them right now is not calm or settled. There is tension beneath it. There is inner turbulence and emotional pressure that has been quietly building without release. This person is not at peace within themselves. Something recently broke through whatever it was they were using to keep things contained. It may have been a memory that came without warning. A familiar song, a place they passed, a name they heard, or perhaps just a rare moment of genuine silence in their life, where the distractions were no longer powerful enough to cover what was underneath. And whatever that trigger was, it brought you flooding back into their mind in a way that did not pass quickly this time. It followed them into the quiet hours of the night, when nothing else was left to think about. In those moments, something uncomfortable began to settle in. The awareness that they might actually lose you, not in a temporary way, not in a way that can be easily undone, but in a way that becomes permanent without them ever choosing it consciously. That understanding did not arrive softly. It arrived in waves. It hit them when they reached for their phone and found nothing meaningful there. It hit them when they tried to enjoy normal moments, but felt something essential was hollow inside them. It hit them when the noise of life faded and the silence felt too loud to sit with comfortably. Something is becoming clear to them now that was not clear before. Nobody else produces the same feeling. Nobody else fills the same emotional space. Nobody else gives them that particular kind of comfort that they once took entirely for granted. And instead of that realization bringing relief, it brings pain, because now they understand the value of what they did not protect when they had the opportunity. What they are experiencing is not simply love awakening. It is love mixing with fear. Fear of permanent loss. Fear that something irreplaceable was treated as if it were ordinary. Fear that the window they assumed would always be open is slowly beginning to close. And that fear is not abstract. It is felt physically, emotionally, in the heaviness of every quiet moment they now face alone. If they could speak without their ego guarding the door, if they could say what is actually true without fear of how it lands, they would admit they behaved as if time had no limit. They would admit they counted on your steadiness without honoring it. They assumed you would remain consistent, no matter how inconsistent they were. They believed your emotional presence would simply wait, indefinitely, without requiring anything meaningful in return. But now they are facing what that assumption actually cost them. They are seeing that silence was never neutral between you two. Every time they chose silence over honesty, every time they chose distance over presence, that choice accumulated. It changed things slowly and invisibly, the way erosion works, until suddenly the structure of what once existed looks very different than it did before. They are now carrying the weight of specific regrets. They regret the moments they disappeared when presence was what was needed. They regret the conversations they avoided when clarity was what was asked for. They regret how many times they chose the comfort of avoidance over the discomfort of honest communication. At the time, going quiet felt like the safer path. It felt like a way to maintain control without having to be vulnerable. But every act of avoidance carries a price, and that price does not always arrive right away. Sometimes it waits, and when it finally comes, it arrives all at once. This person does not struggle to feel. That is not their challenge. Their challenge is that they feel too many things simultaneously and have no framework for organizing or expressing what is happening inside them. Emotional openness feels dangerous to them. It feels like handing someone the ability to hurt them in ways they cannot predict or control. So they have learned over time to pull back instead of speaking up, to delay instead of engaging, to manage things intellectually rather than facing them emotionally. But what is managed intellectually and suppressed emotionally does not disappear. It compounds. And now they are sitting with the compounded cost of all that suppression. There is a psychological reality catching up with them now, even if they have no language for it yet. Whatever we refuse to face within ourselves does not stay hidden forever. It finds its way outward through patterns, through repeated consequences, through the relationships that quietly deteriorate while we tell ourselves everything is fine. They are now living inside the results of what they left unaddressed between you. And one of the most disorienting parts for them is sensing that you are no longer where you used to be emotionally. They can feel it without needing confirmation. Something in your energy is different. The way you respond, the way you engage, even the way you do not engage anymore, it all carries a different quality than it once did. You may still hold something real in your heart when it comes to them, but you are not positioned the same way. You are no longer reaching toward them with the same urgency. You are no longer fighting for explanations. You are no longer holding yourself in emotional suspension, waiting for clarity that kept not arriving. You chose yourself, quietly and without fanfare, and that shift has rearranged the entire foundation of this dynamic. That change lands heavily on them because they had grown accustomed to your patience. They had come to rely on your emotional generosity even without reciprocating it equally. Your understanding was something they leaned on without acknowledging what it cost you to keep offering it. Now that particular quality of your presence is no longer freely available to them in the same form, and they feel the absence of it acutely. What they fear losing is not only the connection itself, but the specific emotional sanctuary that connection provided, the feeling of being understood without judgment, the experience of being given attention and care without having to perform for it. Now they are beginning to grasp that this type of connection is not infinitely reproducible. It was particular to you and to what existed between you. And recognizing that is both clarifying and devastating for them. The questions they are now sitting with are difficult ones. Did they damage something that cannot be fully repaired? Did they treat your presence as permanent when it was actually something that required tending? Did they delay so long that the opportunity to show up authentically has already politely passed them by? These questions do not leave them alone, especially in the still moments of their life when comparison becomes unavoidable, when nothing in their present situation carries the same quality as what once existed between you. That is the ground where urgency grows inside them, not because their capacity for love has suddenly expanded, but because their awareness of what is at risk has finally sharpened. They feel as though a door that once stood open is now gently, slowly, and irreversibly beginning to move toward closed. Not slammed, not locked in anger, simply closing the way things close when they are no longer being actively held open by both people. And that is the kind of ending they cannot easily accept. They want to reach out. They have composed things in their mind that they have not sent. They have practiced words they have not spoken. They want to explain themselves. They want to own what they should own, without deflection, without making excuses for what was simply a failure to show up. But fear continues to hold the door shut from the inside. Fear that you have moved enough that their words would not land the way they need to. Fear of standing in their truth and being met with someone who no longer needs to hear it. So they remain in hesitation, in a space between wanting to act and being too afraid to move, and inside that space the emotional weight continues to accumulate. This is not a promise being made here. This is not a forecast of what they will do next. What is being reflected here is simply awareness, the kind of awareness that arrives when someone is no longer able to look away from the truth of what they chose, and what those choices cost them. What matters now is what this awareness means in the context of where you are. You are no longer occupying the same emotional position you once held in this story. You are not caught inside confusion the same way. You have been doing the internal work, perhaps without even fully recognizing it as such. You have been slowly and genuinely shifting. And because of that, the whole situation feels fundamentally different now. They look back at memories that once felt simple, and they now see them through the sharper lens of loss. They remember how consistently you showed up, They remember how much patience you carried. They remember the many times you extended understanding even when that understanding was not being matched or even acknowledged. And now those memories do not bring them warmth. They bring them something heavier. Because they understand that all of that came from you and that it was not returned in the way it deserved to be. They are also confronting something that is not comfortable to acknowledge. Your expectations of them were never excessive. You were not asking for something extraordinary or demanding something they could not have given. You were asking for the most basic ingredients of any real connection. Presence, consistency, the willingness to be emotionally honest even when it was inconvenient. You were asking to be met where you were, not carried, not rescued from your feelings, simply met. And that is what they could not or chose not to provide. Rather than stepping toward the discomfort of growth, they stepped back. Rather than choosing honesty when it was needed, they chose the version of things that required less of them. And the natural consequence of that repeated pattern is now visible in the distance that exists between you. Not explosive, not dramatic, just quiet, real, and undeniable. Meanwhile, you have changed. You are no longer shaped in the same way by uncertainty coming from them. You are watching more carefully. You are reacting less from emotion and more from understanding. You are no longer operating inside the fog that used to make everything harder to see clearly. You have stepped into something more grounded. And that groundedness is exactly what makes the current situation so different from anything that came before. They are standing at an internal crossroads right now. One direction keeps them hidden. It is familiar. It is low risk. It asks nothing of them. The other direction requires something they have spent a long time avoiding. Genuine vulnerability. Real accountability for what happened, and the emotional responsibility that comes with that. That second direction is the only one that leads anywhere worth going. But reaching it means being honest not just with you, but with themselves. And right now that confrontation with themselves is the hardest part of all. They are beginning to see something they had blocked themselves from seeing. Loss does not always announce itself. It begins as a feeling. Then it becomes awareness. Then if nothing shifts, it becomes permanent. And they are somewhere right now in that middle space, between awareness and the quiet finality that follows it. They can feel that you are settling into yourself, not in anger, but in clarity. And clarity, they are learning, does not negotiate the same way that emotion does. It simply is what it is, and what it is irreversible. They are afraid of more than losing the connection. They are afraid of what it says about who they have been if they lose it. That they chose their comfort over something genuinely meaningful. That they delayed too long, that they held on to the assumption that someone would always wait without ever giving that person a real reason to. There is a second layer to what is being revealed here, something that speaks even more directly to the interior of this situation. This person has been holding back things that were never fully expressed at the right moment, not because the feelings were not there, but because there was always some version of fear standing in the way. Fear of being misread, fear of being hurt. Fear of allowing someone else to see them fully and discovering that what was seen was not accepted. So rather than risking that, they chose silence. And silence, chosen repeatedly over time, becomes its own kind of statement, whether that was the intention or not. You on your end did not make a sudden dramatic departure. There was no single defining moment where you decided things would be different. What happened was gradual and deeply personal. You adapted to what you were being given. You stopped rushing to fill silences that were not yours to fill. You stopped explaining yourself to someone who was not extending the same explanation in return. You stopped abandoning your own emotional needs in order to hold together something that only one of you was actively maintaining. And without any announcement, without making it into an event, you began to honor your own peace. That was not a performance. That was not a punishment. That was growth. Quiet and genuine.